Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Coding with T. Today we are going to learn how to get and show data on Flutter from Firebase, Firestore, and also we are going to get the categories images from Firebase storage. So first quickly have a look what we are going to achieve. Okay, so our application is running, and because user was logged in, so that's why instead of going to the login we have redirected back to the home screen, and in here you can see we have just loaded with the categories. These are the few categories that we have just loaded. When you click on this you will see another loader, and it is going to load some subcategories. Sports, you can see at the top a category, then we have sports equipment, sports shoes, and tracksuits. These are the subcategories of this category. Same way, when we're going to open electronics, we have two categories: laptops and mobiles. And by this way, we have list of categories and also list of subcategories. So first, we are going to learn how to design a model in a way that we can store categories and subcategories on the Firestore and also retrieve them and display as we want. And also, when you head towards the store, you can see we first loaded all the categories over here, and inside these categories tab, we loaded relevant data of that specific category. So as for today's tutorial is concerned, we are going to typically learn how to get data from Firestore, create the data in our Flutter application, and also we will able to see that how we can avoid multiple reads from Firestore and only using one read because categories are loaded. Instead of loading again and again all the categories, whenever the new class will be triggered, you can see the categories are not being loaded. They are already loaded. When you head towards the previous screen, also these categories are loaded and images are being cached. So let's get started with today's tutorial. We are creating Flutter e-commerce application, and we have already completed the design portion, and also in the last section 4, we have completed our backend part for the complete Firebase authentication, including Google sign-in, email and password, forget password, and bunch of other activities. If you're new, you can watch the previous videos and get the playlist link from the description below or from the right top corner. As we are going to start officially the next section or the last section of this playlist, in which we are going to talk about categories and subcategories. So let's get started with today's tutorial. Open your project, and we are inside our e-commerce project that currently we are working on, and we have already completed all the authentication repository that we created in the previous tutorials, and we also learned how to deal with the user repository. So we created a user repository that is doing a lot of stuff for us. So same way, now we are officially going to start the shop features section, and now inside this section we are going to deal with models and controllers. Now the first and foremost, open your Firebase console, and previously we created one user collection. Inside we learn how to add data, how to retrieve this data, and how to display this data on the Flutter app, and also we learn how to add URL inside this profile picture, how to store the data in the storage, and also how first we have to authenticate. So everything is covered. Now to start with the e-commerce, we first have to design our database. So the first thing we are going to design is to create a new collection of categories. This collection is going to store categories and subcategories because our products can be inside one category, inside a subcategory. Maybe one product have one category or some other product have two categories. So it will have many to many relation. To map a many to many relation, we create bridge tables in SQL. So same way we are going to create a new collection if required. But for today, to keep it simple, I'm going to name categories to this collection. Click next. You can create any IDs over here. It can be auto ID, but I'm going to create it one for now. It should be unique. This document ID must be unique. So let's add the values of this collection. I have created a bunch of fields over here. So inside the categories, the first document, the ID is 1, will have a string type of image. Another is a boolean type of is featured variable. Then we have the third value, string type of name. And the fourth value is parent ID, which is currently null, but which can be a string value, right? So the first one is the image of this category. If you see all the categories, you can see we have a sports image, electronics, and bunch of other images for the categories. To store them, we are going to use this image attribute to place the image URL or path of the storage in here, and then we will retrieve the image from the storage. After that, we have is featured true because currently we can see only 8 categories because they are featured categories, and we also going to add a check that we only want to display 8 featured categories. Then we have a name of the category as displayed, and then parent ID. Now this parent ID is going to distinguish between parent and child ID. So how it is going to work currently, because this parent ID is null, this means that this ID is the parent ID, like sports, electronics, clothes and all these categories displaying over here, they don't have any parent. So they are the categories that are on the topmost line, right? So let's add another document. I'm going to name it too. But for the second document, you can see we have image, name, is featured, and parent ID. But parent ID is a string type of value one. So when I'm going to save this, you can see it has some image, it is featured, true, name, and the parent ID is 1. So now with the parent ID 1, I mean that we are going to get all these categories, we will equal to this parent ID, and we'll try to see that if current selected category ID is equal to this value, parent ID. So fetch all the categories where we have 1. So whenever this one will be selected, whatever the name of this one is, whenever that will be selected, we will able to fetch all the subcategories based on parent ID. So this is how we are going to map all the categories and subcategories. Now let's start coding because we are going to deal with the shop section. So inside the model, the first thing we need to create is a category model, which should have the same thing. The first one is the document ID, then we have name, image, parent ID, and is featured. So this means that likewise we have document ID and four values over here. So in total we have five things. These three are string, parent ID is also string, is featured is the only thing which is in the boolean, and because parent ID can be null, so instead of using the null, we are using empty string over here. This means that whenever we are going to check if parent is empty or not, we will use dart is empty or is not empty feature. Then we are going to create a helper class which is empty, going to simply return the same model with filled with all the required empty values. So now in here, whenever we are going to get data from Firebase or store data to the Firebase, we have to receive and send the JSON structure, right? So whenever we're going to create a model which has to send data to the Firebase, Firestore, and receive data from the Firebase Firestore, we have to create two additional functions in each model, because model by name you can see its work is to model data on some structure. So the first function is going to be the function which is going to convert our data which we pass to or assign value to these variables, will convert that data to a JSON format, and whenever the repository which is going to deal with all the Firestore activities, whenever that class is going to call this function, it will get all the values, convert these values, and return JSON. Then same way, whenever we're going to receive a document from the Firestore, because you can see the only single value is a document. So when we are going to receive this value, we usually call this a document snapshot. So when we're going to receive that, we will return the model because our application only knows about this model. So to use in our application, we first have to convert that JSON into a model. We will map all these values to on these variables and we will simply return them. First, create a simple function. This function is going to return the map type, because in Dart, JSON is actually called a map. So we have to call map because JSON, if you know the JSON is using key value pairs. So key will always be in string and value is dynamic. So we can simply declare this as well. You can see the error is gone. Return type is map of type string dynamic, means a JSON return type. Then function name is toJSON, and in the function we are returning curly brackets. In the curly brackets, the first value is key colon name of the value which is value itself. So key and value, then key and value, comma separated. Key value and key value. All the values will be whatever we're going to pass over here. If parent ID is null, then it is going to store null. If it is not null, it is going to store empty. Whatever is passed to this variable will be stored in the Firestore. Now to receive these values, we have to create a constructor, because we have already created a constructor. To create multiple constructors in Dart, we can use factory method, or you can say to create a named constructor, because you see name of this class is category, and by the same name we have created already a constructor which is receiving all the values. Now to create another constructor with a different name, we use the same class name, category model dot from snapshot. So this dot is going to allow us to create different names for the same class constructor. You just have to add a factory keyword. So to create another constructor, because we are going to receive a JSON, you can see this is a JSON format. So we will receive a document which will be in the JSON format, and we will use this document to first check if it is null or not. Document.data, so data will actually be a JSON. So document is going to point to this document snapshot, and inside this we have a JSON. So document.data is a JSON. If it is not is equal to null, or if it is null, we will simply return empty constructor, not a constructor but a constructor actually which is having nothing, which is empty, using this helper class. And then if it is not null, we will get this data inside this variable, and we will return this model to be used throughout in our application. To map that data, we will first receive the ID using the document.id directly this document, then ID, not inside this data, because if you see this, first of all, we are going to receive this document, and document itself has the first ID. So document.id and then data is over here. So document.id is different thing, document.data is different thing. To map it, we first have to map the ID. Then to map other things, we have to choose the same name. Image is featured. These keys should be same. Otherwise, it is not going to find the key, and based on this key only we are finding the value. So data of name, data of image, data of parent, data of is featured. So if these things are going to be null, double question mark means if they are null, we will use the empty strings. And if this is null, we are going to display is featured to false. So we will return that simply. Our model is completed. Let's close this. Create a repository. We're going to deal with the backend. We have to create that repository inside this data, inside the repository. We have already completed authentication and user repositories, but for now, we are going to create a category repository. Now, this category repository is an empty class. If you want to extend it with a getx controller, you can extend it, but if you don't want to use getx, it's okay, just don't declare this. And if you don't know about why we are extending this getx controller and all this, you can get the video from the right top corner, understand all this, and also link from the description below to know in detail about why we extend these things with the class. Okay, but moving forward, the first thing inside this class is the variable, which is firebase firestore.instance, because this repository class is going to deal with the firestore. So simply create a private variable. Now the first thing is we will get all the categories and we will create a function. We will first receive a future type of function because it's a cloud query, so it might take some time, so that's why we have to make it future. And what exactly we are going to receive? We want list, which is an array. We want list of category models, right? Single category is inside this category model. By list of category, we means that we want more than categories of this category model. So name of this function is get all categories. It will be the async function, because without this async, we cannot call the await sign. Always wrap your cloud queries with a try catch, because you might get some exceptions, and if you get unquoted exception, your application will be crashed. Inside this try catch, because we have already talked about in detail why we are going to use these custom exceptions, the Firebase exception to receive any Firebase error and display a relevant message. And also in case of platform exception, we are going to receive that code and display relevant message. Else, if it is not the case, we don't want the user to see any technical details, so we will simply throw something went wrong. Now to get all the categories from that same collection, we are going to receive some snapshot from the Firestore, or you can say a collection of data. So I'm going to call it snapshot. Using await sign, we're going to call the database, which is actually Firebase firestore.instance dot. We are going to get the data from this collection. So we have to name the collection. It should be exactly same. So you have to copy this name. You can copy it from here, which is categories, paste it over here. From this collection, what we want to get all the data. So we directly call this get sign to receive all the data from this collection. So once we have all this data, we want to extract single entry, single document, convert that JSON into model, and paste that single collection into a single model and return using a complete list. So to do that, let's call it list. From this snapshot, we are going to call the documents, all the documents, and to query one by one all these documents, we are going to use the map property, because we want to map this JSON one by one into the category model and return the complete list, because the current entry E is a single entry. So we have to pass this single entry to the category model we just created, category model dot from snapshot, because this is going to require a document. So let me call this variable a document as well. We will pass this document to this one, and whenever this loop is going to be completed, we want to convert all of them to list, and whenever this map is going to be completed, it will return all the values converted into this category model to this list, and we simply want to return this list from this function. Now the snapshot will receive document for each entry, convert that, and you see we're returning this category model. So whenever this complete mapping thing will be completed, we will add dot to list, and that list will be returned back. So we're not going to deal anything like first add a loader, then display some error message, then anything like that, because this class responsibility is only to deal with the Firestore and catch any relevant exception and do not crash our application. So once this category repository is also completed, Add back to the shop, and in here the controllers, right click on this controller, create a new controller, because the responsibility of the controller by name you can see it is that it has to control everything between design and the backend. So currently the backend is the repository. It is going to get this data or the error, because this throw is going to throw the error message. So controller's duty is to display a loader. Once the loader is completed, display a complete data or get the data. Once the data is received, close the loader, display the data, and if there is any error, display some relevant error message. Inside this category controller, what we want to only fetch all the categories one time when our application loads, instead of calling again and again whenever that screen will be opened. That will be very hectic approach, and definitely we will not be able to avoid the reads, number of reads from the firestore. So to also reduce the number of reads and speed up our application, we want to only fetch the record one time and we want to reuse as much as we can. So for that, we are going to extend our category controller with the getX controller, because we want to reuse this instance again and again inside our class. So we have also learned the complete thing. I've already talked about why we are using this getX controller and why we are going to create its get.find instance. You can watch the previous tutorial. Category controller, create a getter method. Name of this method is instance, and what it is going to return get.find, because first we have to create a category controller instance. Once it's created, we can easily call category controller dot instance to execute get.find to return us the same instance of this class again and again. Now whenever we want to load data only one time, whenever this application loads, we want to load data using the controller. So to do that, whenever the first time instance of this controller will be created, using this on init method, we want to call category repository, which is going to return all the data. Once the data is loaded, we want to use that data inside our application. So how we can do that? So first of all, let me call category repository using get.put method. So get.put is the keyword which is going to create instance for the first time. Call the category repository. So this is going to create its instance for the first time, and using get.find later on, because inside this class we also have a get.find. So when we know that already the category repository instance is created, we can, instead of using get.put, we can simply call category repository dot instance. But for now, let's use category repository like this, and let's create a function fetch categories, and in here we are going to load all the data of that category. Future of type void. Future is just because we have to make our function async. Void means that it is not going to return anything but load all the categories. Name of the function is fetch categories. It will be the async function, and inside this function you can see I have already used try and catch, and whatever we are going to catch inside this e, we will simply use the tloader dot error snack bar to display that error message. And inside the error message you can see we have simply displaying a snack bar with the title and message, and in the finally we're going to remove the loader. So the first thing, we will display the loader or start loader of this category. After that, we are going to fetch all these categories from the data store. It could be any data store, firestore, some API, some SQL or anything. Then we're going to update the categories list. So this is the update categories list, means that we're going to create a list which is going to retain its status throughout our application. Whenever we want to use, we will simply call this list, and then we are going to only filter the list and receive the featured categories. So now to reuse our variables throughout in our application, instead of using some global properties, using a getX, we have a type of list which is Rx type of list. So we are going to use Rx list. It will be the type of category model. Name of that variable will be all categories, and again to map or create an empty list, we have to use the empty list over here, and then again the type of that list will be the category model, and you can see it will always be .obs. Why .obs? Again, because we are now covered everything in the previous videos, but just for the go through, this OBS is going to change the state of the design whenever this all categories value is going to be changed. So whenever there is change, it is going to redraw our screens. So that's why we're going to use this Rx list, and also it will retain throughout in our memory whenever we want to destroy this controller. So until this controller is not destroyed, these values will remain inside these variables. So now to also create a loader, we're going to use the same trick. This loading variable is equal to false, and also make this OBS to keep observing this variable. Whenever there is change inside this observer variable, we will redraw our widgets in the design. So first of all, whenever this function will be start loading, I'm going to make this is loading to true. To use its boolean value, we have to call dot value. This dot value is going to actually point towards the boolean, otherwise it will always point to rx bool. So to get actual bool, we have to use this value. Then to all the categories, using the category repository, we're going to get the categories in categories value and also call the wait sign and use the category repository dot get all categories, and that's it. Now this is going to return all the categories to us. Now to assign those categories to the all categories list, we just have to call all categories dot assign all value, and we want to assign all these categories to this value, which is all categories. Now we can use this all categories instead of calling again and again this cloud query in the home screen, the store screen, in the whatever screen we want to use. Instead of calling again and again this cloud query, we are going to use already fetched categories in our design, and also to filter all the categories inside this, control D to duplicate, and instead of all categories we want to use this featured category. And to get the featured categories dot assign all. Now we have to assign all the items, which will be list of items. So we are going to use all categories dot where, because we have a single property inside this where. So using this where, we will receive category, a single category. So using category dot is featured and category dot parent id dot is empty. So by this way we can get all the categories that are not empty, that are the parent categories. You can see the parent id is empty, means that this is a parent category and also it is a featured category. By this way we can get all the categories which are parent, and then we're going to use dot take to get only 8 top categories. Dot to list is going to convert that to the list, and then we are going to assign all this list to the featured categories. Now we just have to make sure that we are displaying the categories, or we trigger this on init method where we are displaying the categories for the first time in our application. For that, head towards the screen, head towards the home, because in the home we are displaying categories for the first time, and home is the screen which will be rendered whenever the application will be opened for the first time. So inside this home, let's go to the home categories widget, which is inside this widget over here, which is home categories. In the previous tutorial, if you remember, that we just created a list view builder to display all the values inside this widget. But now we are going to first get all these values and display them on the design. So first of all, we need to call this controller inside this build method. So whenever this build method will be created, that controller will be called. So again, using get.put, we are going to create the first instance of this category controller, or create a new instance of this category controller, and that instance will be passed to this category controller over here. Now to use this category controller and to use that list, we want to make sure that first loader should be started, and when that loader will be completed, our design should redraw itself without using a stateful widget, using a getX to display all the categories that are being fetched. Later on we will also be able to learn how to use the future builder, but because we are not using a future method over here, so that's why we have to first wrap this sized box into a widget, which is the obx widget. This widget is going to redraw its state whenever that obs variables are going to be changed. Because it is a function, so we have to create a function, cut that sized box from here, and using a return method, because we have to return a widget inside this function, so we will return this sized box, add a semicolon. And now inside this method, first of all, we need to perform few checks. If category controller dot is loading value is true, so using dot value we will be able to find if it is true what we want to return. We want to return loader. So that loader is a category shimmer loader. If you open this, we have created the shimmer effect in the previous tutorial inside the common widgets, and in the shimmers you can create a category shimmer which are going to use this default shimmer class. Using this class we can create any type of shimmer. So inside this category shimmer we are going to use the same size box, same list view dot separated that we are going to use inside this home category, because we want to use this list to display a list of same events. So using that same column, default item count is 6, you can increase or decrease that. We'll first display the image, width, height and radius is 55. Then we have a size box to add space, and again a shimmer effect for the text with a small height so that it look like that we have a text going to appear here. So if is loading is true, we are going to simply return the shimmer instead of returning anything else over here. Then we are going to check if category controller dot featured categories dot is empty. We again want to load a center child text, which is going to display no data found, because the background of this categories you can see is blue. So we have to convert this using text theme dot medium and apply a color of white. So we'll display a text, no data found, and else This is the else case. If these two are not going to return anything, we will simply return a size box which is going to display the actual data, right? Now remove these hard-coded strings. So let's call category controller dot featured categories dot length. So whatever the number of these featured categories, we will display the list view that much of times, and then inside this vertical image text, instead of displaying a default image title, we want to display the actual data. So first of all, inside this item builder, we want to get a single category using category controller dot featured categories at current index. So inside this category we will receive the actual category model, and using that category model we will call category dot image, and then in the title we are going to call category dot name. And later on, whenever this subcategory screen will be triggered using get.to feature, we will pass the current selected category over here inside this subcategory, and based on that category we will be able to get all the subcategories and their products. Okay, once done, let me run this application. Okay, so our application is running, and you can see a loader is being displaying over here, but it is still fetching the record. Okay, I can see the problem, which is when you head towards this category controller, we started this loading, but we forget to add is loading to false over here. So let's add is loading value to false, because whenever this finally is going to be called after all this execution, it is going to remove this loader. So whenever this is going to remove, this obx is going to listen to this is loading. Whenever it is going to be changed, it is going to redraw, and if it is false, it is not going to return the shimmer effect. So let's save it again. Instead, we have to rerun this again. So it's loading, and you can see we have only one record, and we also have an error over here which is unable to load assets. Okay, the reason is that we are displaying image which is a local image. Okay, now to convert this image into a network image, when you hover over this, you can see we have a feature which is network image. When you head towards this, is network image is by default true, and we're using the circular image, and it also requires is network image property. And if it is network image, we are going to use the cache network image. If it is not the network image, we are using simple image to display the asset image. So head towards this variable, and inside when you hover over this, by default we convert this is network image variable to true. Previously it was false. Now let's save this again, and you can see currently, because we don't have any image and we have an empty string, so that's why we cannot find the image. And you can see the exception as well. So we have a default icon, and also in here in the first, you can see we have a abc parent id is null, is featured is true, so that's why we can see only one entry. In the second, is featured is true, but is parent value is not null. So when I'm going to convert this to null, I'm going to rerun this again, and this time whenever we're going to see fetching the categories, it's loading, and you can see two records, but definitely we don't have an image. So again, it is going to display the default icons. Now where we are going to upload all these categories, we are going to upload those categories from the admin panel that we will start right after this playlist, in which admin will be able to upload the categories, brands, products, each and everything. But for now, if you head towards the category repository, inside I've created a dummy uploader which is going to upload all the images from this local assets. We first have to pass a list of categories to this model. It is going to check the Firebase storage instance using a custom class T Firebase storage service. Create instance of this custom class. What it is going to do, first of all, we will loop through each category. We will fetch the single category, and we will try to get the link from this assets currently we have over here, and all the images that we have over here inside this local folder. It is going to get image from data assets. I've created a helper function, which is this one. We have to pass the path variable to this function, and it is going to convert that path and return us the image data that we want to upload to the firestore. So once we will get the data, because we have to pass the string, we will get a file over here, and using storage dot upload image data, which is again a helper function, which is this one. It is going to get a path, get image in the uint 8 list, and then name of the image. It is going to using the same Firebase storage reference dot put data. It is going to upload the image. I've created two variables. The first one is image upload data. Second one is upload image file. So this one is using image data. This one is using image file. So these are two different things. You will get the image file using image picker from the image gallery, and you will get the image data whenever you're going to upload files from these assets. Once you upload it, it's going to return the uploaded URL back to the function called. So we'll receive the URL URL over here. Inside the category dot image, we will replace to this URL, and inside this firestore, we are going to call the database dot collection of categories, and in the document using the category ID that we also pass inside this model dot set is going to upload that specific category ID and also the JSON to the categories. Now we are going to get all these categories list. Inside the controller, I pasted a dummy class, which currently is not working over here because we don't have the models. But if you're going to download the complete Flutter project, you will be able to get this class as well as the buttons to upload all the dummy data to the Firebase, and you will able to display that data whenever you want. So you can see we have all the dummy data. We have list of banners, user model, then card data, then orders. And now for the categories, we're going to call this model, fill all the data, dummy data inside this, also pass images. If you remember, we have all the images over here inside the image strings. Using that data, we first created all the parents. Then we have a subcategories over here, furniture, for the electronics, and some other categories. So we have all the categories over here in a list, and we're going to use this dummy data to upload all the images to the Firestore. We just have to pass the dummy data categories over here, and it is going to upload all the data to the Firestore. Now, as you can see, the categories are being displaying over here, which are the feature categories. Now, inside the store, we also want to display all these categories inside this store. For that, go to the store and open the store dart. Inside, you can see we use the default tab controller to first give the number of categories or number of tabs that we want to display. So because this is static, so we have to convert that into a dynamic value. So inside this build method, first call the same controller, category controller dot instance. We are, because this instance is going to use the get.find property and find the category controller and return to us. We're not going to use the get.put because instance is already created. And then inside this controller, we can easily call featured categories, which is the list of categories we already populated. And then now inside this categories, we can replace the default tab controller with the categories dot length. And same way, when we head towards over here inside this bottom, we created tabs, and also in the tab bar view, we created some tab views. So now how many tabs and how many tab views we want, we have to change that. We created dummy tabs, so remove these dummy tabs. We want to display list of tabs, so based on categories dot map property. Now in here we want to display a tab, so we're just going to call the tab over here as a child property of this tab. We're going to use the text and use category dot name to display text, and then at the end we are going to call dot to list because we have to return list to all the tabs, and that's it. Control Alt L to align. Now it is going to get the categories, map each of them, and as a single entry it is going to return a tab. Tab will have a name from this category, and also now we have to change the tab bar view same way because we don't want to duplicate all these things. So remove all the children's, again call categories. This time we want to map, so let's change this element category. Now we want to return the category tab each time inside this loop, and as a category of this tab, currently we're not receiving a category over here, so this time we want to receive the category, add a parameter. So we cannot use now category tab without using the category, so inside we have a category property and pass the category, and at the end we want to use dot to list, remove this constant, and now we are able to display all the categories. So let's rerun this again. Because our application is running, images are not uploading, and now I'm going to click on the store, and you can see we have only two tabs with a two tab bar views. So our application is still working. So this is how we done with all the things. Now let's talk about how we can upload all the dummy data to the Firestore. So okay, to upload the categories, when you go to the profile, if you downloaded the complete project, go to the profile. Inside we have a load data button, and in that you will be able to see how to upload all of these. So when you are going to click on this upload categories, it is going to upload the categories, then brands, then products, banners. Then we have a relation that we will learn in the upcoming tutorials. So you will be able to upload all the collections of this relation as well. And once done, you will be able to see all the data coming from your Firestore, all the banners, all the products, and everything. So if you're not downloaded yet, you can download. Link is in the description. So once again, that's it for today's tutorial. I hope you learned something new. If you learned something new, please like the video. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe for more upcoming videos. Once again, thank you for watching. Take care. Allah Hafiz.